Welcome to the studio today, B. What's going on, man?
Yes, sir.
All right, we are back. We're live on Buy the Block with Bryan Chavis. This is the podcast where we teach you guys how to buy it, rent it, and profit in multifamily real estate. We've got a great conversation for you today. We're going to be talking about, as we've gone on about asset management, we're going to talk about the role of asset manager when it comes to acquisitions. So we're excited to talk about, or in underwriting. So we're excited to talk about this today.
Acquisitions, underwriting. You're right.
Yeah, exactly.
You're right.
So there's a huge umbrella of roles within the asset management position. So we're going to start diving deeper into each of those responsibilities, throughout our podcast. But before we get into that, we want to thank you guys for listening. If you are enjoying the podcast, we would ask that you just like, share, and subscribe. Leave a review. These things all help us get this out to more listeners. And special thank you to our sponsors, Home Depot Pro, Renometer Pro, a lot of pros out there, Livable. And thank you to RP Funding for sponsoring our event coming up in June.
Big shout out.
Make sure you guys go to buyitrentit.com/live where you guys can learn more about that. I want to get into this today, B. So, within the realm of underwriting, we hear a lot about this acquisition specialist. We see a lot of the spreadsheets and things of that nature. And there's this optimistic view. A lot of real estate firms do task people to look at these properties. Some of them will never step foot on the property. But then you have this asset manager who has a lot more on-site experience and things of that nature. Should have. Yeah. So let's tell me more about the difference between acquisition specialist and asset manager, and why is it important for the asset manager to have a role in the overall underwriting process?
Yeah. So acquisition specialist, i.e. analyst.
Yeah.
Firms have different names as they do sometimes even for asset managers.
Okay.
The asset manager, the analyst, the acquisition specialist, usually are taking data, and evaluating data and numbers and area cap rates and historicals and NOIs, T12s, T3s, or data.
Right,
all
data.
This data.
Yeah.
Looking at areas of opportunities that they've evaluated or the firm has evaluated as areas for potential growth opportunities, doing their own strategic evaluation of a target area, the study of building permit activity, household income, average household size, demographics, psychographics. They're taking all this data and they're making their assumptions.
Right.
They're building out their models. Right? Their underwriting models.
Yeah.
Then they're looking at deals. They're grabbing the T12s, T3s, and they're underwriting.
Right.
They're looking at market surveys. They're looking at competitive properties in the area.
Okay.
Underwriting to those standards typically is what you're looking at. The asset manager then comes to the meeting.
Right.
Typically, playing the role of Debbie Downer.
Right.
Because numbers are great. But in analyzing and again doing the role of an analyzer, it's tough. But it's also based on assumptions. Yeah. So the asset manager's role is to define assumptions more clearly. Okay. And put those assumptions to the test against what they would consider what would really go on at the operational level. Right. And that's tricky. It's easier if you started a firm or you created a private equity firm or small syndication or a large syndication or whatever it may be in your own hometown. Right. Kind of know what's going on. You probably have managed or even owned some property in those areas. The principals do. The general partners probably own and operate or have owned and operated their own small properties, 10 unit, 15, 20 unit, a small apartment building before they became a large conglomerate. So they kind of got their finger on the pulse and know operations, forward facing with the property manager a lot, really understanding. But, when you start to, scale out like we do at Chavis Capital, looking at the Sun Belt, right?
Yep.
You're in areas that you've never been in before. So you really have to, asset management really has to be forward facing, meaning dealing directly with property management, understanding what goes on at the property management level.
Yep.
And that takes a skill set. That takes the studying, of a lot of the reports that maybe even the analysts are not looking at.
Oh, wow.
So an analyst is going to look at financials. Okay. They're going to look at T12s, T3s. They're going to look at operating expense loads. Asset managers are going to be looking at, more of the reporting from a day-to-day operation, renewals, delinquencies, things of that nature. Qualifying criteria of the prospect tenant. Right. Market surveys. They're going to really be studying, and scrutinizing that information, and then understanding how it affects that prospect tenant's demographics and psychographics at the day-to-day level, at the operational level, and really having their finger on the pulse of what the property management team is doing, and developing a management plan based on the underwriting. So they come back and they come to the table or the meeting with this information, and sometimes it's not as it doesn't fit nicely.
That's true. Okay.
With the analyst's numbers and what may really need to go on day to day. It doesn't always do this.
Yeah.
Sometimes it does this.
Okay.
Or it does this, right?
Okay.
So you got to kind of try to get it to do this. Now, in my opinion, who are you going to want to really believe? For me, I'm always going to believe and work with the asset manager because they have a realistic approach of what's going to go on.
Got it.
The analyst is based on numbers and data that they've, obtained, and it's very important. That's very important.
Yeah.
It's based on returns. It's based on the general partner's prefs and the waterfall structure. They build that out.
Right.
But what's going to really happen day to day. That information is typically going to come from your asset manager. Their finger's going to be on the pulse of day-to-day operations, and they're going to tell you whether or not those rents are going to, jive in that particular market area. They're going to tell you whether or not delinquencies are much more realistic, and or build what they need to build, qualifying criteria, marketing, day-to-day operations, the actual management plan. They're going to build that to try to compensate what the analyst has done.
Right.
Sometimes it works. Sometimes, it's always that pull, push.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But typically that's the asset manager's job is like, hey, listen. And it depends on your firm too.
Right.
Some firms are analyst heavy. Some firms are more asset management heavy. More asset management, they're going to, have more leisure, more control.
Right.
More analysts heavy, they're going to be the ones that say, hey, look, here's the underwriting, make it happen.
Right.
And the asset manager has to try to build and develop the framework of a management plan around that underwriting. And sometimes it's like forcing, I forgot that term, a square peg in a round circle or something like that. And sometimes, it's tough. Right. But their job is to essentially figure out how to make that happen.
I think, on our podcast, our goal is to help, we're educating listeners that are acquiring properties, growing their portfolios. And a lot of time, in these real estate firms, there's a disconnect between acquisitions and asset management. And they're not going to the asset manager for secondary, to take a look at this. So.
Well, a lot of departments, Nate, to elaborate on that a little bit, they don't really have strong asset management positions. They have strong analysts.
Right.
Or they've learned how to underwrite.
Right.
Use a spreadsheet.
And it's interesting. I've seen those spreadsheets before. I mean, they're very impressive, but I often think because I started working with you first, I never see CIOTA attached to that. I don't see any type of strategic evaluation of the, in a sense, demographics and psychographics and things like that.
So as it's more forward facing to day-to-day operations, no. As it's more forward facing to the financials, yes.
Yeah,
but
true.
The financials tell a story. The financials cast a shadow.
Right.
It's not what is casting that shadow.
Right.
Is day-to-day operations. You kind of figure out, you see a shadow, but what is physically casting that shadow?
Correct.
Financials will tell you there's a shadow, but what's casting that shadow is usually day-to-day operations will tell you why certain things are happening. So the financials are really important, but the COTA process, to the extent of understanding demographics and psychographics of that prospect tenant, is more asset management driven, right? Because that's involvement day-to-day with the tenant, understanding, hey, I put a unit up for lease today.
Right.
Let's sit and watch how long it takes for it to lease. Okay, we just put it up this morning at 9 a.m. We got 10 pieces of traffic. 10 people, 5 people then visit that property. Right. So you're asking, having conversations, and taking them on tours, asking them questions. Did you like this? Did you not? What did you like about the property? What didn't you like? Are you ready to put a deposit down? So you're gathering all this information, important data the property manager is, right?
Yep.
Sometimes some companies, that data is lost.
Right.
There's nothing that happens to that information. That whole valuable consulting framework that just happened goes up in the thin air.
Right.
Some companies are smart. They'll say, okay, leasing agent, put that data into a guest card, put that data into the software.
Yep.
Then the asset manager receives that data on their Monday morning dashboard reports and begins to say, okay, they're looking for this. Oh, it's too small. Oh, they're looking for a ceiling fan that looks like this. Oh, they're looking for, and they begin to make adjustments in the management plan, in the marketing plan, in conjunction with the property manager, right?
Yep.
So more forward facing, where the analyst is not involved with that.
No.
They're just looking at the financials. They're looking at the shadow. They're looking at the ripple effects.
Correct.
And they're saying this is what the property can do and possibly do, but not really getting to the root. They're just saying, okay, well, this is what the property's produced over the last 3 to 6 months.
Right.
Property manager, asset manager's job is to, really understand, what's going on at the operational level.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of layers.
There's a ton of layers.
Skill sets that are involved. Like I said, you can just that small. We can end the podcast with that. Just that interaction of putting a unit up. Let's break it down so everyone can understand.
Please
the podcast.
do.
Putting a rental unit up at 9 a.m. on Thursday. Getting 10 phone calls or on Facebook, getting 10 emails or messages about it. Converting 5 of those 10 messages, so a 50% conversion to actual tours of the physical property, and then interviewing and having the opportunity to interview those individuals when they visit the property, take them on a tour, ask them what they like, what they didn't like, gather all that information, and then put it into a system to where it can be analyzed. And decisions can be made at the management level and at the management plan level, on how to continue moving forward with that marketing, moving forward with, qualifying criteria. There might be some hints in there that things may need to change. We might need to change out certain aspects within the floor plan, when we punch a unit, within the amenity packages. There's tons of data in there in that interaction between the prospect tenant and the leasing agent. Right. Sometimes, if it's well run, that data, like I said, is retrieved and processed and reviewed. But I'd be 9 times out of 10, no one's doing this.
No,
they're not. They show the property and did you like it? No, yeah. Here's my deposit, and no, and that and that interaction. Number one, the interaction is not staged. It's not scripted like it should be. So you're not asking the right questions. You're not quantifying or qualifying the prospect tenant by asking a series of questions, getting that data, that information back, and then storing that data and scrutinizing that data later to make changes to your operations and your floor plans and everything, your curb appeal. Right. If you just let that data go, which a lot of companies do, they just show the property and they let that data walk right out of the door. Then asset management is more of a steward, and not really, an asset manager. They're just there to make sure the property manager is doing what they're supposed to be doing, collecting rent, some of the basics, renewing. They're not really strategically maneuvering the asset in the direction it needs to be maneuvered, and forecasting and being able to make, the proper adjustments. So.
And yeah, I mean, I think about that often. Like, if you're listening to this podcast and you might be putting together a syndication, and we see a lot of syndicators, there's these overpromising of numbers. And if you're simply a steward, you might find yourself underperforming, on an asset. And now, next you're having a tough time finding more investors to get in on your deals and
just
projects.
But that's maybe on this podcast we'll post a picture. When I think of that, I think of when Gandalf walked in to the city of the kings, I believe, in the castle.
Yeah.
They were under siege, and the guy that was there overseeing the castle was a steward, and it said something, and Gandalf said, "He's just a steward. He's no king. He's no decision maker. He's just a steward." and it's like, a lot of these folks are just stewards,
right?
A lot of these, even some of these large, there's some of these larger.
Yep.
Private equity firms, they're like, oh, just put it in the hands of property management.
Right.
And they're just stewards. And, you're often not exposed until, like in the Lord of the Rings, war is upon you.
Yeah.
And you're exposed as just being a steward.
Just a steward.
And not having the leadership skills necessary. Or, the problem was in the movie Lord of the Rings, I forgot which one it was. The problem is he hadn't alerted or given the permission to alert. They're under siege,
right,
and light the beacon.
Yep.
To warn all the others, right? So everybody can prepare for war.
Right.
And that was the whole idea. You're just a steward. He's no leader. A leader gets ahead of this.
Correct.
And see, there's a difference between lighting that beacon and understanding how to make the proper maneuvers. Lighting that beacon is creating always adjusting the management plan to what's going on. Why are we not leasing?
Right.
Why do we have 5 pieces of trash or 10 inquiries, 5 site visits, and no leases on this unit? We've got to make some adjustments. So, it's constantly, that's being more than a steward.
I'm thinking about this as I'm listening. If you're dealing with an underwriter who takes offense to asset managers looking at their work, you might be working with the wrong type of underwriter. There should be a culture of collaboration. Correct. And vice versa. If your asset manager is not taking a look at underwriting numbers as well, you're missing out on some things. So, you really want to scrutinize these numbers. And we talked about this in our last podcast, hitting prefs and not thinking about different things. So we talked about rent control. So if the asset manager is not looking at these overly optimistic numbers, how can that mess up pref and hitting numbers in a waterfall structure? Because you've now run off with overly optimistic numbers that you presented to your investors.
Yeah, like a lot of complaints we get. There's a lot of gurus and experts being sued.
Yeah.
Because the returns that they talked about weren't hit. And of course, the guru or expert will always get out of it because it's like, well, you signed the PPM. Mm-hmm. And if you read the fine print within the PPM, it says, hey, listen, real estate is highly, volatile. Yeah. And the chance of you losing your shirt, are extremely high.
Right.
And so if you continue to move on with that, you've kind of put yourself at that risk. You know, of course, the general partner or the asset manager runs a risk of not, of losing a good name and
exactly.
And which, can certainly happen. But yeah, a lot of the times it's just, the general partner is going to say, hey, look, we tried to do what we can do. We just lost. We're not able to get you those returns that we talked about due to X, Y, or Z. And, and sometimes when you're a limited partner and you're passive, you may not really understand. And you're like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. We took a hit.
Yeah.
But if you hand that to someone who is skilled, they might say, well, man, did you, what precautions did you make to, were you just a steward? Or did you light that beacon?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, what were you doing? Why wasn't that beacon lit 6 weeks ago, 6 months ago?
Right.
So, you just sent out a report to all your limited partners saying, hey, look, we took a, left-right combination and we took a major hit and we're not able to make our prefs. And then everybody's like, it happens. Yeah. This is investing. But then, like I said, someone that may be more knowledgeable, they're going to like, well, did you, what defense did you have?
Right.
Did you duck? Did you dive? Did you counter? Did you,
right.
I want to know more. Why weren't we prepared?
Correct.
So yeah, you just, those are this is what happens.
Absolutely.
But, the takeaway is to really understand, if I'm a listener, it's like, what is my takeaway from this podcast, this particular episode? The takeaway is understanding that being able to analyze a property is extremely important.
Of course.
but also being able to truly understand what it's going to take to operate that property Monday through Sunday, from an asset management perspective. Yeah. Developing a management plan that's constantly changing and fluid, based on certain conditions, right? Like the last episode, if rent control does take place, how is that going to affect management, operations? It's going to have a huge effect. So, changes in the management plan and qualifying criteria, all that's going to drastically change. Yep. So, who's lighting that beacon? Yep. And are you a steward or are you a true asset manager? Are you ready to light the beacon? Are you ready to have preventative frameworks in place, ready to go to be able to offset some of the challenges? Are you able to forecast properly some of those, challenges that are, could be coming down the pipeline and make the proper adjustments? So that's what you have to ask yourself. And to be a good asset manager, you have to possess these skill sets to be able to evaluate and implement right. The proper systems to be able to, light that beacon and be able to, counter any kind of, certainly headwinds that could possibly come. Absolutely. And because the one thing is certain, Nate, there's always headwinds. Always headwinds. So how do you adjust? Yeah. Always headwinds. Yeah. I've seen that, from the acquisition of our properties, so many things go left and right and, nothing is as planned. Nothing. And so, to just go solely off the numbers is risky. Yeah. Very risky. Absolutely. B, thank you so much for breaking all of this down. If you're listening and you want to increase your knowledge, I would invite you to join us inside of the Matrix. You can go to, it's our group coaching program. This is a great place to get started so you can earn your certifications and really gain that confidence and knowledge to start working with investors. And as you gain that knowledge, then you can get into becoming a consultant, so many other things. Go to buyitrentitprofit.com/matrix. Every Thursday night, we host a group coaching session where you can really dive into the ins and outs of managing rental property, asset management, underwriting. It's just a great experience. We invite all you guys to join. Our goal is to help you guys grow your portfolios in the next year. Thank you so much for listening. And B, once again, man, thank you so much for being in the studio. Really appreciate it. You want to finish out with anything? Yeah, man. Hopefully everybody, I will see everyone in June. Yeah, absolutely. Please subscribe. If you like our YouTube, please share it. Please join our Facebook community. It's free. Tons of great content. Buy It, Rent It, Profit community. Join. If you're interested in the consulting or our licensing, our materials, our training materials to grow your brand. Yep. Please schedule a free 30-minute strategy call with myself personally. It's not, you're not going to get a staff or another team member. Yep. You'll get to speak with me directly. I enjoy that. I enjoy listening to our viewers and helping them grow their careers. We have one of the best premier professional development programs out there. Yep. That offers tons of designations and certifications that will get you along your way to being a really top-notch multifamily consultant. So, I'd love to have that strategy call with you and talk about how we can take you to the next level. Absolutely. You guys can set up a free call with Bryan Chavis. Go to buyitrentitprofit.com/free 30. That's buyitrentitprofit.com/free 30. And you can spend 30 minutes with the man himself and map out your strategy on how you're going to dominate this industry. So we thank you guys for listening. And B, thank you so much for being in the studio, brother. Yes, sir, guys. And remember to buy it, rent it, and profit. Take care. Take care.